This is the Weekly Set, the official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com. Episode 155, recorded May 11th, 2018. Hello everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com. I am your host, my name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here on The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So, today, as usual, we are talking about Lost in Space, Legion, and Westworld. Before we get started, I wanted to just acknowledge that there have been some crazy happenings going on TV, a lot of cancellations. We're going to address that next week. We're just going to kind of go into some of the big cancellations and talk about that next week. Upfronts are going on. That's where all these cancellations are coming from. They're still rolling out. So, as we're recording this on Friday, it's still going on. So there's going to be more cancellations and renewals before, we finish recording this, or before this is posted, or after this is posted, I mean. So it just didn't seem like the right time to talk about it yet. But we're just acknowledging, yes, we know that there's crazy shit going on. And we will get to it. But let's...
there's a lot to go over, actually.
But let's kick things off with our usual show discussions. Lost in Space is leading the pack, Season 1, Episode 4. The Robinsons Were Here, in which all of a sudden there's like a ton of new characters.
Yeah, all of a sudden, like, there's all these people, and it's like, really, like, I was like, because they didn't show the scope of, like, everybody who crash landed on this planet and survived, I guess, because the past few episodes made us believe it was the Robinsons, Dr. Smith, and West, and that woman he found. They didn't really, now all of a sudden there's like this other family, there's like this Japanese family, and then there's like Command, and there's like, I'm like, wait a minute, where's all these people?
The commander has a whole other group of people following him, and then there's like...
And it's weird because they just like show these people like you were supposed to know they were already there, right? There's no they're just there. There's no introduction or like explanation.
It continues on from where it ended last week with just making contact with the satellite station, and then basically everything between that and where the episode starts. Apparently, there's been the characters have been filled in on a lot of information that we haven't yet between those 2 points. So yeah, so that's kind of what's happened on Lost in Space, up to the point where this episode starts. A lot of information they got we haven't been privy to yet. And now we're starting to meet all these other characters that are stranded on this planet along with the Robinsons. What's kind of interesting here is that the Robinson parents head off with West, who, now like West is back in the picture and everything. And this girl that was unconscious, we see her conscious for the first time. They're all back in the picture now, which means there's going to be eventually problems with Dr. Smith. And then there's also with all these different groups coming together, there's going to be problems with the robot now, with Will. So that's kind of like the big kind of, point of this episode is like now characters are scrambling to kind of cover up or like protect themselves from information spreading now that there's more survivors.
Right, exactly. And most of this, episode actually centers around the robot, the young girl there. Penny, right?
Mm-hmm.
She goes to tend to the woman who was unconscious. She's conscious now.
Oh wait, that's not Penny. I can't remember her name. That's the one I can never remember her name.
Me neither. Darn it. She goes to tend to this woman because apparently she has medical training. That was ever explained before.
It was addressed in, when she was trapped in the ice and the mother, like...
Oh, that's right. The mother with her leg. She was giving advice on what to do about her leg.
Yeah.
That's right.
She's not like a doctor, but she's the only one with medical training that's around right now.
Gotcha. So she goes to tend to this woman, and, this woman is conscious now, and she's talking, and she kind of, like, tells her what happened. and she's able to figure out that that robot is what caused the Resolute to crash, right? Is what attacked the Resolute. So now she's like, I gotta tell everybody, you know, and everything. And then, and basically the first person she like tells is like Will, and Will is like kind of like, well, he doesn't say it, but he, you know, he reacts like, yeah, I know, you know.
It's like he's changed.
Yeah, he's changed, right? And Will kind of like, and she goes to broadcast to their parents, you know, and Will kind of sabotages that, and then he packs up and starts running off with the robot, and she catches up to him, and this leads to like the subplot where, you know, Will convinces her, you know, that he'll tell his parents in his own time, and that if they just get the robot somewhere safe and hide it for the meantime, you know, then that's what they want to do. She kind of agrees to it.
And Penny joins them too, so it's kind of like the Robinson sibling camping outing.
Yeah, camping outing, exactly. So they're headed off to like this cave somewhere to hide the robot. It's not too eventful of a trip, to be honest, because
there is some kind of a creature out there that they almost encounter.
Yeah, almost encounter, but don't quite encounter. So it's like,
and they find some cool flowers
they find some cool flowers,
but it's not too much. They're going. They end up finding this cave, and they stash the robot there, and Penny ends up writing "The Robinsons were here" on the wall, and they all kind of put their handprints.
And the robot does too, right? Because the robot sees itself as part of the family, that was cute. But
that's kind of mostly what's going on there. Meanwhile, they're being followed this whole time by Dr. Smith, who, like, as soon as they leave, like, goes down and starts talking to the robot because she wants the robot's protection, because she knows that, you know, she's going to be exposed soon, and she wants something that can protect her. And so she's trying to convince the robot that they're basically in the same boat, that the Robinsons, that Will's going to kind of even turn on him. Everyone's going to turn on him because of the fact that he's this big scary robot that did this thing on the station, and that she's the only one that won't, but she won't do it not because she cares or anything, but because she needs him as well, and that he might need her. So they kind of have this little moment like that where Smith is trying to manipulate the robot to gain some semblance of protection.
Right.
Because her secret's going to come crashing out sooner or later, you know?
Yeah, her secret.
There's the commander on the Resolute, you know, that was sending out the message. He knows who she is and had her arrested. And then, of course, you have West, who we've seen is now with this Japanese family. He clearly, you know, is going to have a bone to pick with her. That brings us to the other kind of storyline that's going through the episode, which is that they end up finding a piece of wreckage from the Resolute. When they use like imagery to kind of pin down different locations of crashed Jupiters that they're going to check out, and they find one and they're like, this isn't a Jupiter, this is a chunk of the Resolute.
Yeah, it's a huge chunk of the Resolute.
So the Robinson parents, along with West, go out to kind of investigate that. They're looking for, I think, a transmission thing or something, some kind of piece of equipment. They get to the Resolute and discover that instead of that, there's just a bunch of alcohol stuffed in the box where that's supposed to be. And we find out West is a smuggler, that he's been smuggling it. And it's
he's been smuggling alcohol.
The one thing they needed is the thing he's like, oh, nobody's going to need this. And got rid of it in place of alcohol. So they're not too happy with West right now. But he's like, hey, I didn't know this was going to be an issue. I was just trying to make some money on the side. It's not like I purposefully sabotaged us, you know? Yeah, so they're doing that, and then
that doesn't endear West to them, like right off the bat, you know.
But the mother kind of leaves in frustration and sees something much, much, much worse, which is that along with the big chunk of the Resolute that crashed is the Resolute satellite communication dish. So it doesn't matter, even if they had the equipment that West left off, they still wouldn't be able to contact the Resolute because the Resolute can't receive a message without its satellite. So they're kind of like, okay, we're screwed now. The mother and father are kind of near the satellite dish. It tips over and falls over on top of them. Like, doesn't hurt them or anything. It's a massive satellite dish. But now they're like under this dome, basically. And it's forcing them to kind of communicate with each other and communicate the issues they had, which we finally find out that a big part of the hostility between them, especially on the mother's side.
Big part of why things have been icy.
Yeah, is that John Robinson he wasn't forced to take on another tour and leave his family behind. He left on his own. He decided to go. And that left a really bad impression with the mom, basically going like, you lied to us, you told us you had to go, and you left us again. You abandoned us again, and you didn't even have to. You didn't even talk to us about it. And so now we kind of get where this iciness comes from. And it makes sense. And, you know, if you have anybody in the military in your family, you know that there's this like sense of responsibility that a lot of them have about like, you know, the job's not done and they have to kind of go back and still work on it. That there's a lot of people in the military that have that kind of feeling. And so that's kind of what they're implying John had, that John basically did not feel like a sense of closure from his previous mission and that he had to kind of go back. But that put a strain on his family because he put his work first.
Yeah, he put his work first. And so that's the reason that the relationship hasn't been so loving.
Mm-hmm. You know, now that this is out in the open, things have kind of warmed up a little bit. Not greatly, but, you know, it's still in a better place. West ends up kind of blowing a hole in the side of the satellite dish to help them out. And then as they're kind of getting ready to go and kind of packing everything up, they see this like crazy thing off in the distance, this like cluster of life that's like glowing life forms, like spiraling around, this like beautiful kind of shot, you know, and we kind of see this from other perspectives too. We see like, you know, the Robinson kids reacting to it as well as Dr. Smith.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. That's the episode. There's not a lot happened.
That's all the major beats. Yeah, it was more of I appreciated that it was more of an introspective episode focusing on the characters and less of oh my god, we are going to die every single second this episode is running.
They didn't have the butterflies that eat electricity.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing to bring up is that now that they've gotten in contact with this Japanese family, they found out that basically all of these ships, all of the Jupiters that are down, have been kind of put under siege by those eel-like creatures that eat fuel. And that's basically made it so that like none of the ships can really leave orbit because they're all basically gotten their fuel destroyed by these eels.
Yeah.
So it's not just the Robinsons.
Not just.
I don't know what explanation is for that these eels just magically appeared in all of their fuel tanks. It made sense with the Robinsons because they landed in water, you know? But
yeah.
I don't know how that works with everybody else, but it's basically, it's going to work as a MacGuffin to say like, oh, they can't leave and they can't contact this other satellite thing. And they're already kind of setting up some semblance of conflict between, the commander that was going to be in charge when they landed on the planet that they were supposed to be going to, which for the first time, they didn't really even reference this before. We knew that they were going off to, I think it's Alpha Centauri.
Yeah, Alpha Centauri.
It was always kind of felt like more like that they were going there in order to colonize it. But like in this one, they established like, oh, people have already been going there. Like it's already been colonized and they're like developing it there, you know, like it seemed at first like that they would be like the first ones going there. Am I the only one that kind of like read it that way? That it was supposed to be like they were going to be the ones finding Alpha Centauri and setting up there. And then now we're finding out that like actually no, it's already kind of been colonized and they're just joining.
Yeah, I think I read it the same way you did at first. But yeah, it's already been, they have it now, so it's already been colonized and they were just joining them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay.
But yeah, so now it's the issue is, can any of these things make it to Alpha Centauri now? Because now they're lost in space, as the title says.
Lost in space.
But that's pretty much it. That's the episode. We'll talk about the next episode next week. But now let's move on to Legion Season 2, Episode 6, titled Chapter 14, because it's the 14th episode of the total series. Again, confusing us with numbers. This episode, I just want to remind everybody, the last episode ended with the realization that the Lenny that had returned to Division 3 was actually the body of David's sister that had been altered, and she'd been kind of replaced, like written over by Lenny. And so this is like a huge loss for David. So this episode kind of is like this, talk about an introspective episode. This is like an episode that's basically exploring it, and it's weird to explain it. The best way to explain it is that one of the Davids in this episode explained it as the idea of like the multiverse and about different possibilities.
It's David.
Your life takes a different route and things happen differently and it forks from there. And then you make another choice and it forks from there. And so this is like a bunch of Davids.
In different potential realities, I guess.
Yeah.
It was really confusing when I started watching it because, I'm like, wait, how does this relate to last week? And wait, nothing's relating to anything, actually. What's going on?
I think the real point of the episode is it's all there to show how important his relationship was with his sister.
Yes.
That's an underlying moment of almost all of these alternate storylines.
All these alternate storylines involve his relationship with us. She shows up in almost every one of them.
Yeah.
Right? There's several different versions of David we see here. We see a version where he's an old homeless man, an old crazy homeless man. We see a version where he's old, but he's a billionaire,
and he's kind of cold.
And he's very cold. We see a version of him where he is just a lowly stock boy.
Who's heavily medicated to the point where he's dull.
Yeah, heavily medicated to the point where he's dull, where, he comes across as a bit simple. Yeah. And we see a version of him where he is clearly messed up and he's raving about the multiverse.
There's one where he's happily married with kids.
There's one where he's happily married with kids. So we see all these different versions of David, right?
The best being the one that works in an office and sees a singing mouse or rat.
Yes! I almost forgot about that scene, the one where he sees the singing mouse. I guess they kind of all these different versions of David, all these stories involve his sister in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And
most of them do. Some of them it's hard to keep track of because some of them you're seeing a younger version and then an older version.
Right.
And you're not sure if they're the same one or if they're two.
Because billionaire David, one of the problems that made this episode confusing is we have all these different versions of David and then the episode just freely jumps between them at random
and at different times
at different times, so it made it hard to keep up with which narrative you were following at any given time. As obviously as the episode went on, I at first it's a difficult watch because when you first get into it, it's really hard, it's really confusing, it's really hard to follow along and figure out what the hell's going on. But then as you piece together and as they keep jumping between the different Davids, you start to get familiar with them so that when it does cut to one, you actually start knowing what's going on. But I think it takes you a solid 30 minutes just to
there's still some
get your footing. And there's still, yeah. It takes half the episode.
Guy, is that supposed to be the continuation of the David that was heavily medicated?
I don't know. I don't even know if that's related. That's the thing.
Because we saw the David that was heavily medicated turned a bunch of police cars and stuff to shadows, like Hiroshima style. I don't know if you've ever heard the stories about the shadows in Hiroshima.
I think that's more that's a thing David can actually do. No matter what version of David he is, that's something
we only saw two versions of him do that.
Right.
We saw this young version that was heavily medicated, and then we saw the old homeless guy do it several times.
Yeah.
So that was kind of I was like, are they both doing that, or did the young one die at that one point after he wiped out those cops? Because it almost seemed like he died there, but then like I said, it's confusing.
They suggested the young one died. died, right? He got shot, and then right after that, they cut to his sister visiting his grave, right?
If that's that one.
But here's the thing: they both die, though. They both die.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, you see a lot of deaths of different versions of David.
Did you like the homage to A Clockwork Orange?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Very obvious.
The bully beating him up. That was another example of like I said, the Hiroshima effect. And I don't know if you know about this, but like when the atomic bomb went off in Hiroshima, Japan, there are like shadows that are burned into like the ground of people that died there. And it's not really shadows. It's like they were like atomized basically, and like their burnt remains like sealed onto the ground and look like shadows. And because it was so hot. And so this is like something that they've preserved in Japan that you can go and visit. If you go to like Hiroshima in Japan, you can see where these burned shadows on the ground. And that's kind of the effect they did with David's power, just to show that his ability is like basically an atom bomb going off. And it's different than the way like, God, what's his name? The Shadow King can like just wipe people off and turn them to ash. This is like much more extreme than that.
Yeah, it's much more extreme.
This is like an atom bomb going off, basically.
So basically, like Homeless David, right? We see eventually, Section 13 starts hunting him down.
Division 3.
Division 3. See, I'm just never gonna get that right. And then Carrie ends up killing him, slicing him in half, right as he's trying to do another Hiroshima.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the end of that version of David.
God, I love that effect of when like the force was first going after him, when he was in from that scene. It's from that same scene, but when they were first going after him, and he just turned around and held his hand out, and you just see two of them go flying off, like into infinity, basically. It was such a cool effect, because they just like, they didn't get like launched far. It's like they basically just went off and disappeared into the distance.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. It's pretty cool. Here's an interesting thing, right? Yeah, the like old billionaire David, we actually see a scene like where that version of him is young, and he's like a coffee boy at some very organization, I guess, some business. It's kind of vague what it is, but they're making this deal with this woman, and they're giving this woman a raw deal because their product, whatever they got going on, you know.
There's a class action lawsuit.
There's a class action lawsuit, and since David read minds, he finds out about it, and he tells her about it. He manages to convince her that he's not crazy and that he knows what he's talking about. And I guess from that moment on, she takes him under her wing. And I guess from there, he's able to use his powers to make himself incredibly wealthy. You know, that's the implication that I got.
Well, he signs some paperwork in the episode that basically they say will now make you the richest man in the world.
Yeah, make richest man in the world. And we see that version of David. He's cold, he's callous, right? His sister comes in, he's asking for a house, and he kind of like, you know, he kind of uses his powers, and he gives her like a nosebleed. You know, he hurts her and then says no more houses. You know, like he is very, very cold.
Yeah.
And then what's interesting is, though, afterwards we see that version of David and we see Farouk, you know, and they're kind of in the same room together. They're looking at each other, but we don't expound upon that.
Mm-hmm. It's not the only time we see Farouk too. Like we see an iteration of the Shadow King, the blob version of the Shadow King, in the police car in the one scene with the heavily medicated David.
He sees them all over the place, heavily medicated David, which suggests that version of David obviously takes place in the past and takes place in a version in which Farouk was inside of David and was still inside of David's mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We presumably also got a scene from the David that we know, which is the one who tried to hang himself with the cable, and then got sent to the asylum, because I mean it's either very similar to the David we know or it is the David we know.
I think it is the David we know. I think it's the David that we've been following because it just plays scenes from the first season up into the present, up until what we saw at the end of the last episode. And it's funny because when we get to the end of the last episode, it's the end of this episode.
Yeah.
So we still haven't moved forward from that point in time.
Yeah, introspective episode.
Yeah, introspective episode, yes.
Yeah, I kind of like I said, I think the entire purpose is to kind of show the importance of his relationship with his sister, and to show kind of, and they're kind of using this idea of, you know, these different iterations of David to kind of establish that. There's more, it's not just that. It's not like a really concise, just to that single point. Like, it's also just exploring different facets of who David can be as a person. But a big part of it, I think, is supposed to tie into his relationship with his sister.
It uses multiverse theory to give us a different perspective on David and his relationship with his sister, and it's very much an introspective episode. Very creative, if not very confusing at first, because it doesn't just because it doesn't clearly delineate. Here's David A. We're gonna follow him for a bit. Now here's David B. and we're gonna. It freely jumps between these different versions of David without even really introducing them to the audience or like cluing the audience into like what's going on at first, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's a bit difficult to watch at first. Like, I was super confused for like half the episode. I got to admit.
Well, that's Legion. I think Legion's just a confusing show in general.
Yeah.
But it was still entertaining.
It was still entertaining. It was still a good episode. I enjoyed it. I really liked that. I think very creative. I've never seen a show do that before, so yeah. Yes.
Legion continuing to be good. I think the only complaint I have of the episode is some of the prosthetic effects that they put on David to make him look like different versions of him.
Oh yeah.
Too great.
there was also another version of David where he's old and he's bald and he looks a lot like Professor Xavier.
Yeah, there were a few things that kind of reminded, the old billionaire one kind of reminded me a little bit of Xavier too. Like, he spoke with like a more of a affectation and stuff, and seemed looks like an evil David with hair.
Yeah, evil David. And I gotta say, like, that had to be on purpose, right? That had to be on purpose. Yeah. Just kind of like a wink and a nod to people who are in the know of, you know, whose son David is.
Yeah, but that's pretty much it. Let's move on. We'll talk about Legion again next week. From the previews, it looks like the plot is moving forward next week, so we'll be able to talk about plot developments. But let's move on now to Westworld. The season 2, episode 3, Virtue e Fortuna, and so this one goes back to Bernard and the present timeline that we completely skipped last week.
Yes.
This episode actually starts in another park, another one of the parks that associated with Westworld. Not the Shogun World either. It's a park called the Raj, which is basically like India. And I guess we got it wrong about the Bengal tiger being from Shogun World. It was actually from the Raj.
You did not count on there being another world besides Shogun World.
I figured there would be, but I didn't think we were going to see one like before we even got a clear view of Shogun World.
All I could think of was like 18th or 19th century India world has got to be boring.
I imagine it's going to be like kind of a big game hunting kind of world.
Yeah.
That's what because that seems to be kind of what the implication seems to be. It's not the same kind of excitement as like Westworld all the parks are going to have a little bit of a different thing. Like, this one seems like it's also more romantically geared, whereas, Westworld's more adventurous, you know. It'll be interesting to see like what Shogun World is, because feudal Japan and the Old West are very, very similar as far as like thematically, like how it's used. I mean, in fact, a lot of the classic Westerns are actually based on like Kurosawa, like samurai films. Like the Magnificent Seven is based on the Seven Samurai and stuff. So those are very close, but like India in that era isn't really that close to anything like that. So
so that's why you didn't guess that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we find out like as the episode opens, we find out what's the deal with the Bengal tiger, and it turns out that this other world completely separated from Westworld, right? The same thing's happening there, and which which makes you wonder because you can, until now, you can kind of explain Westworld as, this was, I don't want to say Bernard, but you know, who he's based off of.
Robert Ford or no, Arnold.
No, Arnold. Yeah, you can say that this is because Arnold secretly programmed this into Dolores, right? Because with all the time he was spending with Dolores and what we saw from last season, it seemed like Arnold was setting Dolores up to become self-aware at some point. So up until now, you could kind of argue that this was largely something led by Dolores, but then other robots that have had like zero contact with Dolores or any of the robots at Westworld are starting to become self-aware independently.
And that has using the same line of code or dialogue too, that these violent delights have violent ends.
Yeah, using the same line dialogue. So that has much bigger implications, right?
Yeah, so apparently, assumedly, I guess, all of the parks are being affected by this.
Yes.
We don't know to what degree because, you know, with Westworld, there's Dolores being a part of it as well as Maeve and her direction and being connected to it are much more direct and directly influenced.
Right.
On top of the fact that all of the robots no longer recognize host or guest, the difference between guest and host. Whereas we don't know if like in the other parks, if it's just that aspect or something, you know?
Yeah. What's interesting is Dolores and Maeve seem to be more self-aware and the other robots seem to be following their script except ignoring the programming that says they can't hurt guests.
Yeah, they're kind of like following their scripts and they seem like a little bit confused. Dolores actually, like I have it marked at a different point here, but refers to them as being like children.
Right.
Like they're just on those first stages of becoming self-aware and they don't really understand it. So they're just kind of following their scripts.
And as we saw I think it was last episode or the episode before that, where Maeve runs into Dolores and it seems like Maeve is even on a higher level than Dolores is, you know?
Yeah, she's purposely gone in and upped all her stats, so she's like...
Yeah.
We see that again in this episode, by the way. We see somebody do that again. We see Bernard hack into a robot because we should get there first, which is basically... We went through the beginning of the thing. This India world, a woman got attacked and her lover, who she met there, and he died. She got attacked by the tiger, and they fell into the sea together. That's the tiger that washed up.
Yeah. Not a terribly exciting story, except for the implication that this is happening at other parks. That's the takeaway.
Yeah. And then, then after that, we see in the present day with Bernard and the group that he's with, they re-encounter Charlotte. So not a lot to say there except that Charlotte's still alive. Apparently, she could also be dead. I mean, there's the case of the copies that we've seen too, you know, where like Bernard's a copy of Arnold, you know, and we've seen that kind of being hinted at in the first season that they could copy people. So she could be a copy. She could be dead and be a copy. We don't know, but apparently still alive.
Apparently still alive. I don't think they're going to start trotting out random copies. I think
there's too much going on.
I think the only person that was really engaging in that kind of thing was Ford.
Yeah.
And who knows what
Delos is doing, you know?
Yeah. Who knows what
they're gathering the DNA of their guest and stuff, so who knows?
That's true. That's true.
But I think I think everything that's going on, it's too busy to really put in a subplot like that.
Yeah, it really is. Too busy. I agree.
But then we go back to the near past storyline, and it shows Bernard and Charlotte when they're still together, and they've left the garage thing there, the bunker that they were in, and they're going after Peter.
They're going after Dolores' dad.
Yeah,
right?
Peter Abernathy.
He has something in his code that Delos wants, like something specific.
They track him down to this area where some Delos guests as well as Peter are being held hostage by what's his name from Grand Theft Auto 5? The crazy guy from GTA 5, and some other robot cowboys that we saw in the first episode, basically holding all these people hostage and still playing out their scripts, still unaware of that. And the leader is, like I said, that guy who played the crazy guy in GTA 5. But anyways, the plan that they have to get Peter out of there is they call out for help, or Charlotte calls out for help and lays a trap for the one robot, the one host, to be attacked by Bernard from behind, and then they hack him. They go into his code, and they probably can't, change him back to defaults and everything. That's like some weird system-wide thing that happened. But what they can do is change his personality. And so Bernard makes him like the fastest, most skilled gunfighter in the West, but also like puts up his virtuousness like slider all the way. So now he's like a virtuous gunfighter that's out there to protect people, which is actually the kind of hilarious in a way, because he was like talking like he was gonna like rape this one woman that was there and stuff, and like and freaking her out, and she was crying and stuff, and then he comes back and he's all trying to help her, and she's like, get away from me.
Yeah, she's like, get away from me.
She's like running from her. He's all, let me escort you. She's like, get the fuck away from me. But they use him to try to clear up the situation, and it goes fairly well, except, some more hosts show up, some more people show up, and in that chaos of that, Charlotte ends up getting away, but Bernard ends up getting captured along with Peter.
Yes.
And then that brings us to kind of Dolores' storyline, which, right before this stuff happened, we saw her basically going to like a fort, which I believe was the town we saw in the valley in the last episode. And so she goes down into this fort area, and she talks to the person who runs it, and she gives him a modern weapon and has him kill a Delos soldier, and shows off her forces that follow her as like a way of basically saying, we need to unite in order to take on these Delos forces. I'm a credible force to be reckoned with as well, and this is my proof of that. And this weapon is proof that you're not going to be able to survive these forces unless we work together. And she lets the guy keep the gun and goes into the fort, and now she's setting up for a siege against Delos. Then at night, during, I believe that same day, basically that happens, a bunch of people come into the fort with some prisoners, including Bernard and her father, Peter, Dolores' father.
Yeah.
So now Dolores gets a chance to talk to her father. He's a big jumbled mess. There's something clearly wrong with him. He has moments. It's like somebody with Alzheimer's who has like moments of lucidity and then completely is off the rails or something. That's kind of what they're, I guess, basing it on. So she talks to him. There's a moment where it's like she's talking to her father, and then he's gone again. She's like, something's wrong here. So she gets Bernard, and she has Bernard take a look at him, and Bernard recognizes that there is a massive file that was like shoved into him, and then like a patchwork persona basically over the top of that in order to get him out of there, that was like, didn't really have much attention put into it. And because of that, it just kind of, it's glitchy. It's not perfect. It's screwing up between different personalities, because it's just a quick patchwork fix designed to like have that robot get out of the park, basically, so that Delos can nab him. And it's not too good of a work, and so he's a big mess. So he kind of tells this to Dolores, and he's kind of like watching over him, kind of taking care of that. And that's when like the big clash between Delos and the fort happens. Which I want to note, one thing is that I love battles between like different levels of technology, like in fiction. There was an anime I really liked called Gate, where the protagonists were like from the Japanese self-defense force of the present, and they go back into this like swords and sorcery kind of environment, and they're just completely overwhelming, like the knights and stuff, because they have like fighter jets and tanks, and it's just kind of like fascinating to watch like this disparity and like the kind of the shock on the faces of the knights and stuff. Well, here you're getting kind of the same thing, except you're kind of more rooting for the host. And they're kind of being overwhelmed. Like you see them facing off against the Delos soldiers. They get a few hits in, and then the buggies, like, come over the cliffs with like all the soldiers in them. And you can just see the kind of shock and dismay on all the faces of all the soldiers at the fort, the host. And yeah, we get this like huge battle scene, and it's all like a trap from Dolores, because she basically said that they were going to, fight off these people together, but Dolores very cruelly like locks all the guards out from the fort and has her people shoot them through the doors that they're trying to get back into the fort, basically to block off the entrance.
Right.
With like a pile of the bodies and stuff. And then it gives enough time for the Delos people to get close enough, and they set off some dynamite and basically kill a bunch of the Delos soldiers.
Yeah, kill a bunch of Delos soldiers. Now, like the leader of the army that Dolores just killed, in order to block the door, the leader, that guy, she sends off with Teddy to have Teddy kill him, and she says something like, not all of us deserve to be saved, or something along those lines.
Like what she said in the first episode when we saw the memory of the one Native American that she killed, the Native American host, and she had said the same thing to him, basically, that not all of them deserve to be saved.
Yeah, she said not all of them deserve to be saved. So she says that to Teddy, and she sends Teddy off to kill him. And then she kind of follows Teddy, and she watches, secretly and Teddy doesn't kill him. He lets him go.
Yeah, to her disappointment. And he does it, what's interesting, using a line that she said, because she had referred to them as, he said that they're like, these people are brutal, or something, the hosts, like Teddy had said that earlier.
Right, yeah.
And she said they're children.
They're children. He used the same line.
Yeah, he said, like, because the guy said, you're like me, the one guy that he was supposed to kill is like, you're like me, and he's like, I'm not like you, you're a child. And then let him go and let them go. It's basically like saying, like, I can't kill these, they're just children, they don't know better, I can't kill them. They need to like figure things out and become more self-aware on their own, and they can't be judged for the actions that they're programmed for. And Dolores is not happy about this. We don't really see any action from her in response to us, but we can see it on her face that she's not happy about this. But while all this is going on, while that was all happening, Charlotte had found a group of the Delos soldiers that were going to do this attack, took charge of one group of them, and used them in all of this chaos that was occurring to get Peter and take him out of the fort and transport him back. Apparently, we've seen in the present day one that she still doesn't have him, so apparently this doesn't go well later on. Something's going to come up, but at this point, Charlotte has him. And she takes off, and Dolores chases after him, but it's too late. They got the buggies, they're out of there. So yeah, that's pretty much the Dolores side of the story, and it covers also Bernard's part of the story, I believe. And that leaves what I think is the more exciting part, which is the storyline with Maeve. So Maeve and her group are going, they end up getting confronted by some Indians.
Yeah.
Maeve goes into full PTSD.
Yeah, Maeve goes into full PTSD. They're with that writer, right? And basically, the one guy Maeve is with, that she's romantically involved with now, right? Mm-hmm. He can speak their language. He talks to Indian, and then they're like, "Oh, we'll let you pass, but we want that." They want the writer, right? And he's like, "No, I don't think so." Maeve's still under impression that she needs him to find out where her daughter is. Mm-hmm. Obviously, refuses. This leads to a potential confrontation with the Indians, where they have to run away from them. It's a very tense scene. Yeah.
So they run away. They end up getting to an elevator into one of the tunnels or whatever, into the backstage area of Westworld. And so they escape the Indians. They get down to that tunnel. As they're walking down, the one head writer gets fed up with the romantic energy between Maeve and the other guy, and basically points out that like they're just following storylines that were written, and the guy like tries to argue, but then the writer is basically using his own lines at the same time to like basically prove that it's all like written dialogue. But it was directed towards the other one, Armitage, I think. Was it Armistice, the girl that he was supposed to be with. So they're kind of walking. They're a little bit bitter towards each other. As they're going down the tunnel, they see one of the Delos staffers running down the hallway on fire followed by Armistice, who's there, and she, has a flamethrower. I love the line here, just because I know it's going to pop up in a general HBO promo later, where the guy says she's got a dragon.
Oh yeah,
and they're going to do like a general HBO promo where they're going to show him say she's got a dragon, and then they're going to
cut to Daenerys.
Yeah,
yeah.
You just know they're going to do that, so it's like it was kind of funny. But now Armistice has joined them, and when they follow her, they get back to the place in season 1 where they had left Felix and Sylvester behind, with Sylvester with a grenade under his chin. So this is all like we'd seen how they got to this point last season, and then we haven't seen them since. Well, now they.
Yeah, I was wondering, what happened to them, since last season. What was their fate? I guess now we know.
So now we got Sylvester and Felix are back, and they're with Maeve again, and they head up and they're going back through the park. It's late at night now, and they're going through the park, and they're going to like a area that's kind of like snowy and in this forest, and they see like a campfire. And so they go like, well, maybe they're friendly or something. And as they approach the campfire, there's nobody there, but there's somebody like buried under the snow by a tree, and they dig it up and they pull out a head of a samurai.
Yes.
With the head set on and stuff. Upon seeing this, the writer guy is like, we have to get out of here. We have to get out. He's like freaking out. Then we see somebody off in the distance in the shadows yell out, and it's another samurai, and he's charging at them. And that's it. That's how the episode ends.
That's how the episode ends, with somebody from Shogun World, right?
So the question is, did they somehow cross over into Shogun World without realizing it? Or are these samurais who crossed over into Westworld without realizing it?
The scenery sure does change pretty dramatically, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, it's all snowy and
it's all snowy. The writer just says, "Oh, this is the Klondike sector," but that's conjecture on his part. He seems to actually be lost, without wanting to clue Maeve in on that, right?
He freaks out when he sees the samurai's head.
Well, yeah, obviously, because he's not expecting to see that. Like I said, my theory is he doesn't actually know where he is or where he's going.
I think he knew where he was once he saw that.
Well, yeah, I think once he saw that, or he had an idea, like maybe they crossed parks.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see what's behind his fear of that, because he's with some pretty badass hosts that are all like enhanced and shit that have guns. So why should he be so freaked out about?
There's no guarantee. Yeah, right.
Because they were going through the area in the west with rogue hosts that could kill him too. So why is he so freaked out here?
He was acting pretty chicken shit about that too. Crying about how we shouldn't be out in the open like this,
Yeah, but he really freaks out about the samurai thing. So I think we need some context on what that means.
Oh, hopefully we'll get that context next week.
Maybe Shogun World is like the hard difficulty level.
Hard difficult level. It's Ninja Gaiden difficulty.
Yeah, it's the harder area. Maybe he's put together that I don't know, something there that's dangerous that he's worried about. We have to get some context. I'm excited that we finally got to Shogun World, because I've been waiting for that since the season 1 finale.
Yes.
So Maeve and her group they've officially crossed with Samurai World. Whether or not they're in Samurai World is arguable, but they've crossed with elements of it now. So we've seen 3 parks in this episode, basically.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the episode. What do you think? Are you still in?
I'm still in. It's good. Yeah, definitely. This is not boring so far. I'm still in. Hell yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely into it. There have been a few parts I've been really enjoying. Like I said, I dug the little she's got a dragon line.
She's got a dragon. Yeah, that's definitely gonna be cut into some HBO promo. It's funny because like I had this idea like HBO could do like cross promotion, right, with Game of Thrones. Like they could have Game of Thrones, like a typical Game of Thrones scene with the actors, and then have them all suddenly freeze and like suggest that that's a park in Westworld.
People
the
have joked
whole
about
time.
that. Like during season 1, people were joking that, like we're gonna find out that one of the parks is actually just Game of Thrones.
Yes. Surprise! That's the big twist at the end of the series.
Westeros World.
Yeah, Westeros World. Yeah.
That stuff was cool. I thought the battle between the fort and Delos was pretty cool. And I'm super psyched for Shogun World and how that's going to connect in. So
yeah, me too. I'm excited to see it next week. For sure. Like, oh my god, that ending. Yeah. Watch them not even pick up on that plot thread until the week after this week.
Yeah, they're going to completely shift over to other character stories.
Yeah.
It's going to be all about the Man in Black.
Yeah, because he didn't show up this week, so they're going to ship him next week.
We'll have to see what ends up happening with that. But like I said, that's it for Westworld. We'll talk about that again next week as well as the other 2 shows. And as I mentioned, we'll talk about the recent crazy cancellations that have been occurring across mostly network TV, but a few cable channels as well. But until then, here's what's coming up in the week ahead. So today, we're recording this on Friday today. All Night came out on Hulu. Bill Nye Saves the World back on Netflix. And Evil Genius, The True Story of America's Most Diabolical Bank Heist, which is a documentary series, came to Netflix. Tomorrow, May 12th, 2018, Patrick Melrose comes to Showtime. That's Doctor Strange himself in this British miniseries. Then on Sunday, May 13th, 2018, Little Woman comes to PBS. And then on Friday, May 18th, 2018, You Are Wanted comes to Amazon, and 13 Reasons Why has its 2nd season on Netflix. So a little bit less stuff once we reach May, less crazy debuts, but still again, most of the stuff here seems to be on Netflix. But yeah, that's what's coming in the next week. So you can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. Check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast. Just look us up. The entire backlog of our podcast is also available on our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch some of the back episodes, that's where you can go for that. So thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best